Before we begin, we know
Thanks,
the
Rob.
president is still self-isolating with a COVID infection that has kept him off the campaign trail this week. What can you tell us about how he's recuperating, and have you had the chance to talk with him?
Thank you so much for having me, Rev. Look, there was a statement that was put out by his doctor yesterday making it clear that he is doing well. And I know for a fact that he is ready to get back out there on the campaign trail, talking directly to voters, taking his message out to the people in this country. That is where his support is. That is where we have seen him really, be able to make that contrast. And there's so much at stake, Rev. I mean, we obviously, have been talking a lot about this past week about the Republican convention and some of the divisive, dangerous rhetoric that has come out of the mouths of some of the speakers. Of course, you mentioned there's a rally tonight with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, his vice presidential choice. J.D. is essentially the poster boy of Project 2025. He is somebody who's made it very clear he supports a national abortion ban. He is someone who's made it very clear that he does not support the rights of women. This is a very dangerous ticket, and President Biden is looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail, taking his message directly to voters about what's at stake in this election.
Now, we mentioned at the top of the show that former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are supporting Biden and urging donors to do the same. But you also have nearly 36 House Democrats and 4 Senate Democrats calling on President Biden to drop out of the 2024 race, among them Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown and Texas Congressman Mark Vesey, who's the first defection from the Congressional Black Caucus. The entire caucus, other than him, have urged the president to stay in the race so far. And many of us in the civil rights community, I talked to the president a week ago, Monday, and he was determined he's staying in. I've not joined people in calling for him to step out. I'm willing to support whatever he decides. But how is he reacting to these latest calls on him to step down?
Well, a couple of things, Rev. First of all, the Clintons have been supportive of the president, both in the 2020 campaign and also, obviously, this campaign cycle, too. I just went to a fundraiser not too long ago at former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe's house, where the Clintons also co-hosted and spoke. So they've been longtime supporters. And, of course, no surprise, they're obviously still very much with President Biden. But, look, I just want to make a point here. I mean, President Biden has made it very clear, and I think something that kind of got a little lost at the very end of the press conference he held a couple of weeks ago at the very end of NATO. He made it clear that, look, if there are members of Congress who need to run against him, that they're going to perform better if they run against the president, if they want to run with him. He doesn't care as long as they win, as long as they do what they need to do. That is what matters. And what matters to President Biden, of course, is beating Donald Trump. And he knows that is also coming from the members of Congress who have called for him to step out of the race. They share those same worries that we have to beat Trump. That is why President Biden is excited to get back on the campaign trail, taking his message directly to voters and proving time and time again that he is the best candidate to take on Donald Trump. He beat him in 2020. He's going to beat him again. And by the way, Rev, you know this very well because you and I have talked about this a lot on your show and on Morning Joe. We've talked a lot about what President Biden has done for the American people. He's created over 15 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, passed 4 major economic bills, put the first black woman on the Supreme Court, relieved student loan debt for millions of Americans. The list goes on and on. He's done a lot for the American people, and those are proof points to make it clear that he will get a lot done in his second term for the American people, and he wants to get back out there on the campaign trail and make that case directly to voters.
No, and that is a concern of a lot of people, including me. He has done a lot, but how do you preserve that and move forward? Because there's still more work to be done, and how that's best done is the only discussion I think that is credible, rather than all of this back and forth. But with President Biden sidelined from campaigning this week, Vice President Kamala Harris has been on the trail, talking earlier with donors in Massachusetts and raising $2 million, according to the campaign. Can you talk about the role the vice president is playing right now?
Yeah, she's playing the same role, Rev, that she's played this entire time. They have such a great partnership. She's been an incredible surrogate on the campaign trail, traveling across battleground states, and she'll continue to be doing that. She's obviously in P-Town, very excited crowd there. I've been talking to a couple of campaign staffers who are there, and They say the energy is electric in the room for the Biden-Harris ticket. But this is exactly what the vice president has been doing. They have such a great partnership, such a great friendship. You can't imagine really a better duo that is out there together on the campaign trail, and also a better duo to really take the message directly to the voters about what's at stake in this election, how dangerous Project 2025 is, you know, the limitations that would be put on women if Donald Trump stepped 1 foot back in that White House. It's terrifying to really think about. And the vice president is an incredibly effective messenger, you know, especially when it does come to women's reproductive health, which is one of the top issues that is driving voters in this election cycle.
Yeah.
So she's continuing to do what she's done all along, make the case directly to voters. And that's what you're going to keep seeing her do over the course of the next 3.5 months.
I want to go back to something you referred to. Trump has distanced himself from the controversial conservative plan known as Project 2025. But the platform assembled in part was from his own former White House staffers, Trump's White House staffers. And it plays like a wish list for Trump's potential second term, including the desolation of government agencies and the replacement of federal workers with Trump loyalists. Meanwhile, this week, President Biden laid out new proposals to curb rent increases and to expand the Supreme Court. Your thoughts on the contrast between what Trump people are putting out and pushing, and I might say J.D. Vance is a big proponent of the Project 2025, and what President Biden is putting out this week in terms of rent and other things that affect people in the country.
You know, Rev, you've heard me say this a number of times on your show, that the contrast could not be more clear, that Joe Biden is fighting for working families and to make their lives better, versus Donald Trump, who is fighting for to seek political retribution and fighting to keep himself, frankly, out of jail. You know, he's now a convicted felon 34 times. That was not the case in 2020. He is making it clear where his priorities stand. That is one of the reasons why he's running for president again. But when it comes back to Project 2025, I mean, I think this is why we're talking about it so much on the campaign, because it really would, if implemented, even if part of the agenda, Rev, were implemented, it would have such a dangerous impact on the lives of the American people. As you mentioned, part of what this agenda entails is essentially gutting the federal government and putting people in the federal government that would do Donald Trump's bidding. You know, one of the great parts of living under a democracy is having a system of checks and balances in government. Yeah. Project 2025 is set up so that there wouldn't be a checks and balances. So Donald Trump could literally do whatever he wants to do in the White House. And we also have to make it clear, Rev, that there is a very decent chance that the next president of the United States will be able to pick 2 Supreme Court justices on the court if a couple justices retire. That's also something that we have to keep in mind. If we think the court is weighted against the American people now, think about how much more it would be weighted if 2 more conservative justices were put on this court, especially young justices that could serve 40 or 50 years potentially on the court. So there's a lot at stake here. You know, Joe Biden, as you mentioned, putting out policies to reduce rent for people. He's always thinking about ways they can make the lives of working class people in America better. That's what Joe Biden is all about. There's a lot of people who know him as President Biden. There's a lot of people out there who know him as Joe Biden, who's fighting for me. And that's why he can't wait to get back out there on the campaign trail and really make that contrast and take this message directly to voters.
I have to ask you this. I'm out of time, but as I mentioned, former President Trump and J.D. Vance are about to take the stage. In fact, here's Vance live on that stage right now in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for their first rally as a presidential ticket. And while the Trump campaign continues what it considers to be minority outreach, one thing that Vance does not bring to the ticket is diversity. Can these 2 right-wing white men speak to the future of all America?
No, they can't. And I thought it was so silly. The first night of the convention, there was so much talk there's a woman of color up there. Oh, there's a union person up there, blah, blah, blah. This is the new makeup of the Republican Party is what some of the pundits were saying. couldn't be further from the truth. The unions are on our side. Workers are on our side. People of color are on the side of President Joe Biden. Why? Because he's gotten a lot done for them. Unemployment's been at a record low among Black Americans. Small businesses among Black Americans has been at a record high under President Biden. He actually doesn't just go out there and talk the talk, Rev. He has the accomplishments to back it up. And that is something that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance cannot say.
All right, Adrienne Elrod, thank you for being with us again.